This brings us to the second panel of this session B of the day, and she will introduce the eminent panel that is there. As you will recall, the Secretary General of the United Nations convened a Food Systems Summit to raise global awareness and global commitments and actions that transform food systems to resolve not only hunger, but to reduce diet-related diseases and heal the planet. And this panel discussion will have two eminent speakers. Professor Sibanda, thank you indeed, and to the speakers in advance, kindly continue.
Thank you very much, and welcome distinguished participants to this panel on food systems transformation in Africa. It's being held virtually, but we all feel like we are in Africa today as we are taking a deep dive into the issues that pertain to food systems in Africa. As has been said, my name is Professor Lindwe Majele-Sibanda, and I'll be your moderator for the next 45 minutes as we focus on preparing for the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit. However, before I introduce my panelists and we take a deep dive into the issues pertaining to the 2021 Food Systems Summit, I think there are some issues that we need to contextualize. Why should African food systems be transformed? What would a transformed agrarian food system look like? And who should do what? What is the role of science in the food systems transformation agenda? And what are we saying about our preparedness in this journey to 2021? The sequencing of these sessions speaks clearly to what needs to be done by science and the science community. In session A earlier today, we had two panels focusing on conceptualizing the Africa food systems. Professor Ewi spoke eloquently about the challenges we face and the opportunities that we need to grab. We also had the gender roles session that was focusing on the unequal status of women in African food systems. Just now we heard about the climate smart African food systems. Now, what's important is to address the question of what can science bring to the table in addressing all these challenges. As we reimagine a transformed African food system, there are four critical things that I look at. We want a food system that enables access to safe, nutritious food, and that will be speaking directly to SDG 2, 9, and 3. We also want a food system that allows affordability and economically efficiently produced food. That speaks to SDG 1. We want a climate smart, environmentally sustainable food system. And we also want to speak to sustainable consumption, SDG 12. Science definitely has a strong role to play in all this. And we couldn't have done it any better without bringing the world's best scientists to talk to the issue of our journey to the Food Systems Summit of 2021. I'm happy to introduce today Professor Luis Fresco, a strong friend of Africa, who's been the president of the Wageningen University and Research Executive Board member since July 2014. She's a professor at Wageningen University and a corresponding member of Belgium's Royal Academy of Overseas Sciences. Professor Fresco is also a member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences as far back as since 2009. A foreign member of the French Academy of Agriculture, a non-resident member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Agriculture and Forestry in Stockholm, a corresponding member of the Real Academia de Ingeniería in Madrid, a member of the Royal Holland Society of Sciences and Humanities, and a foreign member of the Royal Flemish Academy of Belgium for Science and the Arts, class of Natural Sciences in Brussels. She is a distinguished visiting scholar of the Academy of Sciences in South Africa. However, most relevant to today's panel, she is the serving vice chair for the scientific group of the 2021 Food Systems Summit. Welcome, Professor Fresco, and thank you so much for your time and wisdom that you are going to share with us.
Thank you.
We also have a panelist, Professor Caron, who is a veterinary doctor and specialist, Patrick Caron, who is a specialist in farming systems and territorial dynamics with a special focus on livestock farming. He is the vice president for the international relations at Montpellier University of Excellence. He chairs the Scientific Council of Agro-Paris Tech and is a member of the French National Council for the Development of International Solidarity. In 2015, he chaired the organizing committee of the Global Science Conference on Climate Smart Agriculture, which was held in Montpellier, France. And in 2016, this was in 2016, he chaired also the International Conference on Agri-Chains and Sustainable Development. In 2017, he was at the International Conference on Living Territories. He was recently appointed as a board member of the Consultative Group of International Agricultural Research Centers as part of the steering team that provides strategic direction for the delivery of the mission of the CG, which is ending hunger by 2030 through science to transform food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. Most relevant to our panel today, he's a serving member of the scientific group for the UN 2020 Food Systems Summit. Welcome, colleagues, and congratulations to both of you on your appointment as members of the scientific group for the 2021 Food Systems Summit. This is an exciting journey. The UN Secretary General has come up with a number of support structures, including an independent scientific group that will bring to bear the foremost scientific evidence and help expand the base of shared knowledge about experiences, approaches, and tools that are needed for driving sustainable food systems. Over to you, Professor Luis Fresco. You are the vice chair of this scientific group. Can you help us understand what is this group about? What is the composition? And what are we expected to see come 2021 as an output from this group?
Well, first of all, let me thank you very much and also congratulate you upon a very important and interesting appointment. It's a great pleasure for me to see on the screen so many of the friends I've met in South Africa, and of all the honors you read out, my special fellowship in the South African Academy is by far the most prestigious that I feel very strongly about. Indeed, I feel I've always been a friend of Africa, and I will remain a friend of Africa because there is so much creativity and so many wonderful things are happening there. Now, when it comes to the scientific group for the summit, let me first start by saying that it's really unique in the UN system, apart from the climate area, but certainly in the food and agriculture area, to really have a dedicated group on science. I think that in itself is a very important step. That group is composed of people who are independent. So it should be autonomous, it's not political, it's all high-level people from all the different disciplines and all the different continents. And I think that is very, very important also, so that it's very broad in its sense. But that group to me is only the tip of the iceberg, because while it is independent and inclusive, it really should be inclusive to, and that's its explicit mandate, to grow in the expertise from many, many people. So its task is really, first of all, to mobilize the world's scientists who are in this field. Academies of science, like in South Africa, in Africa, there are many, many academies all over the world, will be asked to contribute. So in a way, we will start building a body of knowledge of what we know about agriculture and food, and particularly to look at what works. The whole idea is not to do science in an ivory tower, but to come up with concrete actions. And that's why the scientific group is very closely aligned to the action plans and the action roads that are being defined for the summit as a whole. So the action tracks will also be mirrored in the structure of the scientific group as agenda. Secondly, it's very important that the dialogues that are going to happen now as part of the preparations for the summit also have a science component there. And there will be several kinds of pre-summit events in various guises that will be done in countries to mobilize people to think about what actually works. So it's not just descriptive, it's really action-oriented, synthetic. And one of the important parts that I really want to also leave with this group here is, as you know, science can only indicate the advantages and disadvantages from a scientific point of view of certain solutions. So for example, you can say it's very important to be self-reliant in a particular region, but that may mean that in some ways the prices of food will be more expensive because productivity is less efficient. That is a choice, that is a political choice. And so the scientific group is not there to come up with standard solutions for politicians, but it can say if you do not protect, for example, the internal markets, there is a cost to that in terms of the price to the farmers, but there is an advantage of that for the consumers. So it's formulating these trade-offs, which I believe will be in part a very important contribution of the scientific group. So in all, we will mobilize people, also young scientists, and all over the African continent. And the whole issue, and this is really where I would like also to invite people to prepare, what are the lessons learned? There's so much that is happening in Africa that actually works. Well, let's have it on the table and show how we can make things work. And I think that is the major contribution. If you want to know more details on the terms of reference, then there is a website to look at the exact composition and the different members. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Fresco, for unpacking for us what this is all about and how we can engage and how you will remain inclusive. And most important, how there's a bottom-up approach where at country level, there will be stakeholder engagements that are aligned to the action plan. Thank you very much. It's becoming clearer now. Now, when we talk science at global level, the first word that comes to mind is CGIAR, Consultative Group for International Agriculture Research Centers. Professor Patrick Curran, you've just been appointed as one of the pathfinders who are going to take us to the new world of CG. I'm keen to understand, and I'm sure many are keen to understand following your recent appointment, what should we expect out of the CGIAR family in this journey towards 2021 Food Systems Summit? Over to you, Professor Curran.
Well, good afternoon to all, and thank you so much, Lindy, where you let us feel a bit like in Africa, and I'm so happy to see so many friend faces. This is also an opportunity to thank you, to thank France and Aldo for this invitation, for this wonderful moment. Well, first of all, before looking at CG, and as you rightly pointed out, I was appointed quite recently. Just a complimentary comments on the summit, and not just by chance, because I think they really relate to what CG can provide, or at least to questions raised to CG. The first one is the title of the summit. It's food systems. It's not food. It's not food security. And this brings us back to the way that Julian May at the beginning of the afternoon introduced system thinking and the way we should look at food at the heart of nexuses. Second, it's absolutely great. It has been announced by the UN Secretary General. So that means that it's on the global agenda. not only in Africa, just like the session, food systems have to transform themselves in all regions of the world, in all, with different and specific pathways, certainly. And this type of summit only occurs once in 20 years. Third, it relates to global concerns. I saw your picture when you were not on the screen, Lindy, where you were pointing out SDG 2, but around SDG 2, there were all the other SDGs. And the summit is focusing, of course, on SDG 2, but it also focuses on the way food system transformation may help addressing all SDGs. So this is really quite a big change in the way we have to think food system and their transformation. And of course, and I will not be long on that because Louisa's rightly emphasized that, is about the, and what, well, as you know, CG will celebrate its 50th birthday in 2021, and it has been created to address food security as it was defined during the first food summit in 1974, focusing mainly, one, on food supply because of demographic transition, and second, on the capacity to provide food for the entire world. We know, and we've listened quite a lot of talks this afternoon about that we are in a new world, we are in a new context, we have to address new challenges. We've moved from the 20th century to the 21st century. And similarly to what justified the organization of the World Food Systems Summit, as we just discussed, the CGIAR has embarked on a very deep reform with a new strategy which takes on board all these concerns. I'm not necessarily the right person to tell you about this new strategy because I was just recently appointed, but I can at least share what I've understood so far. And this new strategy is composed of 5 pillars. Number 1, a sharper mission towards 2030. So it acknowledges the 2030 agenda, and you read at the beginning this mission, it's ending hunger by 2030 through science, to transform food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. So it's exactly aligned with the terms of what we've been discussing and with the terms of the summit. It meets the Food System Summit transform expectations. Number 2 is a new governance, I'll be brief. Number 3, an institutional integration. Number 4, new research and partnership modalities. And these will very probably be announced during the Food System Summit in 2021. All stakeholders have begun to think about that, and the new portfolio should be then shared at that moment. And 5 new modalities. To finalize, yes, the CG has a global dimension, and through its local, national, and regional partnership, because of its mandate, it might be a very strong opportunity to align with the UN expectation and in the same time to deliver something new.
Thank you very much, Professor Caron, for unpacking the CGIAR new way of doing business. I'm looking at the charts and I'll share with you, we are being congratulated for having the giant scientists on screen and sharing wisdom. And as you can see, colleagues who are participating today, we have unpacked 2 mega initiatives. That's the 2021 Food Systems Summit and the new face of the CGIAR, here represented by Prof. Patrick Caron. What I take from that is that we are talking food, number one, and that unifies all of us. We are talking a systems approach. We are talking UN Secretary General raising our flag to say food systems are important and they need to be realigned globally. But most important, we have our own CGIAR, which is celebrating 50 years next year. That's going to be unveiling a new way of doing business. Thank you very much, Prof. Karen, for unpacking that. Now, I want to take you both to your comfort zone. I read your very elaborate profiles. I myself am part of ARUA, which is an alliance for research universities in Africa. And the question that my colleagues will be asking me is, what's in it for us in this 2021 Food Systems Summit? So before I take you there, can I just find out from each one of you, how are your universities, University of Montpellier in France, Wageningen University in the Netherlands, how are you positioning to effectively engage and contribute to the Food Systems Summit? It's about learning and sharing. Let's start with what your universities are doing. Over to you, Professor Fresco.
Thank you very much. Indeed, that's a very relevant question. And as you know, we have both Montpellier and Patrick and myself were there at some of the ARUA meetings. I think I cannot imagine my institution not to be engaged with African universities and African research institutions. We are now 102 years old, and ever since the beginning, we had foreign students and we had an interest in working outside the Netherlands. And interestingly enough, it was really part of our mandate always to be relevant for what were then called developing countries, which we now call emerging economies and so on. So for example, to give you an idea, in a country like Ethiopia, where we have been working for a long, long time on agriculture and rural development, we have trained, I think, about 500 Ethiopian engineers from our institution, who are now all in, not all, but many of them are in leading positions up to chancellors of universities, ministers, vice ministers, and so on. So the first task of a university is to help with capacity building, not just by bringing people over to train here, but especially to train the trainers and to work with the professors in institutions in Africa to make sure they get access to the best possible knowledge. Today, for example, with all our libraries online, that's becoming much easier than before. The second one is the proof of the pudding in working together is that you need a long-term engagement. This is not something, you know, of running in and running out and doing one little project. It's about trying to learn to understand each other's language, each other's culture. To give you another example, also from from East Africa, we have been engaged, I think 50 years ago we started with that, with the mapping of the East African soils, chemically, physically, and so on. So the soil map of Kenya, for example, was greatly done by many, many Dutch students. And that has also the advantage of creating a body of people here who really understand the nitty-gritty of the details. Now, beyond this, I think our strength that we can help to bring to bear to African issues is exactly this systems approach. As many of you know, we are an extremely specialized university. We're not a general university, and we basically deal, and we are #1 in the field with agriculture, including the veterinarian and the livestock side, forestry side, food, nutrition, and environment, including water. And in these fields, I think we really have the top specialists. What I'm working on day and night is to try to integrate that in an interdisciplinary and systems approach. And the unique thing of this summit, for the first time in UN history, and I've sat through a lot of UN summits on food-related issues, is it's not just about food security. It's not even just about one SDG. It's about a food systems approach. And one thing we haven't always done very well in the agricultural field is to understand that most of the value added is not in the primary production of growing crops, but in helping farmers to be part of a chain where the value added is there, both for the consumers in terms of better quality, but also in terms of higher value for the farmers. And so this food systems approach, I think, would be a tremendously interesting intellectual tool also for African universities to think about how do they want to structure their teaching in the future? Yeah. How do you want to structure your research? And I think that is something we can help with. And as I said, we have been engaged with many African universities. We, up to today, are engaged in dozens of countries and with great, great pleasure and great success. I just sat on a PhD defense 2 days ago with the PhD candidate in Nigeria, me in my black robes here, on a subject that is dear to my heart because it was my own PhD, cassava. What more can I say?
Wow, wow. Thank you very much, Professor Fresco, for sharing, but also for touching on Ethiopia. You've got a shout out from Obsu, who says, thank you for mentioning Ethiopia. I'm sure it's a colleague you've worked with out there. But I think what you're bringing is this long-term engagement. It's not a hit and run, it's for the long haul. But more important is that for the first time now, we can talk broader than just agriculture, than just production. And more important, we don't want to leave our farmers behind. We don't want to leave them at the farm. We want to carry them from farm to fork. We want healthy farmers who eat nutritious food, but more important, in the value chain, they must have dividends and returns that filter back to increase the farm income. Thank you very much for assuring us that the summit, the Food Systems Summit, will help us develop a new narrative that will take us beyond the farm gate. Thank you very much. Professor Caron, I want to come back to you. What are you doing in France to help Africa join this bandwagon and drive the food system 2021 food systems train?
Well, I would begin to say that for historical reasons, for intellectual reasons, for partnership reasons, we are cousins with Wageningen. And that means that many topics and issues, we share many values and topics that Louise has just mentioned. And that will help me be a bit brief. But let me also begin with 3 convictions as we are talking about Africa. First, the future of the world will be written in Africa because of the breadth and the depth of the changes that will take place. It, of course, relates to Africa first, but it also be the future of the world. Number 2, of course, we have to look at breakthrough knowledge and technology, but development is mainly based on the capacity of producing knowledge within a society. So I don't that much believe only on the transfer of the best technology to the best lab, from the best lab, but on the capacity, on strengthening the capacity to produce a specific knowledge in each country, in each region, in each locality. And then I'm really advocating for development through research rather than research for development. And third, the partnership and the strengthening the capacities, all our capacities, even our and all countries' capacities through partnership will be key. So once I said so, there has been quite a lot of changes in Montpellier recently. The University of Montpellier coming together, well, maybe doing the same shift as Wageningen has done some years ago, coming together with research organization, and particularly 2 research organizations which are quite active in Africa, which are namely CIRAD and IRD. So this consortium, Montpellier University of Excellence, represent a scientific community of more or less 10,000 persons working on the connection between health, food, agriculture, and environment more specifically, which makes it some a unique density in the world, and in the same time connected to other European partners like Wageningen, and for historical reasons to African partners, with more than 200 researchers permanently based in Africa, with a lot of students and PhD coming to Montpellier, a lot of programs, a lot of hostings of mobility on these specific topics, and more particularly on the links and interaction between health, food, agriculture, and environment. So when it comes to food systems, just to provide some examples, as we have seen their faces today, I was so happy to see Sheikh Mbo and the Future Africa Institute, to see Julian May and Liz Corsten as responsible for the National Center of Excellence in Food Security in South Africa, to see you, Lindiwe, for the Aurora Center of Excellence on Food Security. And once again, as Louise said, congratulations, because we are involved together with you and exchanging and contributing, and you also contribute to our global knowledge as a way back. It's not just one direction on that. And to give a very concrete example, we were so happy to be part of the 3rd Global Conference on Food Security, which was held in 2017 in Cape Town, where we had the chance to offer that the next conference, the 4th one, will be organized by Wageningen and Montpellier, in Montpellier. It was supposed to take place in June. Because of COVID, it will take place in December, and we really expect you as many as possible. And in addition to that, and I will finish with that, back to the conference, we are thinking of organizing a science policy interface day to fuel reflections towards the Food System Summit. Because as Louisa said, and as many speakers have said previously, decision-making is not only about knowledge and about science. And science has really to integrate that much better to be as efficient as possible to deliver food system transformation. Over.
Thank you very much, Professor Karen. I love what you said about development through research and not research for development. That's a new narrative I'm taking from this dialogue. Colleagues, you've spoken about the strong partnerships that you have in Africa. I want to push the envelope a little bit. And if you could think of just one game-changing technology that has come out of your partnerships. Wageningen, we're talking over 100 years. Your cousin in Montpellier, I'm sure it's another decades of years of experience. What would you say is one game-changing research partnership output that you would put a flag on and say, yes, we did it?
If I may start, I would say our program, which is called Bringing N, meaning nitrogen to Africa, has been really very successful. It's among others in Ethiopia and East Africa, but it's really about harnessing natural sources of nitrogen to leguminous crops, making sure that we get the best possible conditions for example, maize and other crops to grow. Looking also at perennials that can, through rhizobia and other things, it's a little bit technical, but to get the best possible conditions for farmers to grow things. I think that is really very important. On the other hand, I think there is a lot of work that we're doing on nutritional quality and nutrition interventions that I should also mention, because this is not just about agriculture. And the work we've done on iron deficiencies, also, for example, with South Africa, iron fortification in foods, making sure that particularly young infants and mothers have better quality food, to me is part and parcel of this whole food systems approach. So it's not just about raising productivity, as you rightly say, it's not just about farmers, it's really about connecting farmers and consumers. And what we must make sure of is that it really also benefits the poorest consumers in cities. Making fruits and vegetables available with high quality nutritional standards that are at the same time affordable and are also safe. I think that's really one of the most important things. Last but not least, we're in major ways we're involved in reducing food losses. As you know, about 35% of all the food that is on the field actually doesn't reach the consumer's plate. And in Africa, a lot of that is lost because of fungi, because of rats, because of poor storage qualities, of also problems at borders. You know, tomatoes from Mali don't reach Senegal because they sit at the border for 5 days for all kinds of senseless, in my view, administrative reasons. And I think we should really make a point of this losses and waste. Can you imagine if we would recuperate that 35%, and we're doing it in some projects, that would already make a lot of difference. It would lower the prices of vulnerable foods in a way, of especially fruits and vegetables, and it would really make food more accessible. So these are win-win situations, and I would like to identify for consumers to pressure also the politicians to take action. This is not rocket science. Yes, we need some rocket science. Let me say that as a last point. I do believe the advances we're making in genetics to really try to make crops less prone to diseases, to drought, for example, to make animals less prone to diseases. Think of all the Rift Valley fever problems that we have today. Those are really big steps, but they're not yet there completely. But we have some real quick wins that we should pressure on and say, this is what we can do. This can make a difference within a year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Fresco, for unpacking some of the tangibles. Because when we talk with policymakers, we can't just stop at SDG 17 on we've got partners, we've been friends, we are cousins, we are brothers, we are sisters. We need to deliver the tangible outputs and the technologies that can make a difference. So thank you very much. Over to Montpellier. Professor Caron, in just 1 minute, what would be the go-to show-off technology or output that you would dangle and say, yes, in our partnership with Africa, we did it?
Well, this is a very, very dangerous question, because I did not look at the list of participants, the many participants, but as I will certainly forget one of them.
I didn't say the best, I said just pick one from 1,000.
Well, I would, when Louise was looking at all technologies, I was listening to her and say, well, I can complement with this one. But in fact, she made a whole list, and that will be very repetitive. So I could go from vaccine to remove ringerpest, or to genetics, to look at the different characteristic of and traits of culture to adapt in very different contexts, whether with rice, whether with sorghum, well, I could do that. I will certainly forget some. And all of them are part, if we look at the food systems as a whole, the best, and I will turn the question around this way, rather than repeating what Louisa said, I would say one of the technology, if I may say so, which really is important, is how to support the capacity and the advice for looking at the right technologies in different places and to align with the context. So advisory services and new methods for stimulating dialogue, for supporting decision-making is what I would add. And this has a direct connection with the input of the summit, because at the summit, we are expected to stimulate dialogue at all levels.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Professor Karen. I would have loved to hear from both of you how we would tame another animal. That's the UN itself, the UN bodies. How are we going to get all those to align to the 2021 Food Systems Agenda? This is our golden opportunity because food affects all of us. I'll leave that because we don't have time. Our parting shot, I want to pick from what Professor Karen said. The future of the world will be written in Africa because. Over to you, Professor Fresco. How would you finish the billboard on the future of the world will be written in Africa because? Your parting shot, please.
Because from purely the demographic potential, it's going to be the most important continent in the world. And it's the youngest continent. It's the continent that has the greatest ambition, I think, the greatest potential also to move ahead very, very rapidly. So no doubt in my mind, I agree. I always agree with Patrick, but this time I really do agree.
Thank you. The future of the world will be written in Africa because it has the youngest, most youthful, innovative, and ready for change agents. Over to you, Professor Karen, in 30 seconds. Future of the world will be written
in Africa because Africa is the unique, offers a unique chance, which is creativeness and its imagination, to design new pathways that we are all needing to look at addressing future challenges.
Thank you very much to my two panelists for that engaging debate on our journey to 2021 UN Food Systems Summit. Africa is ready is the new billboard for a sustainable food systems that will be aligned to meet all our needs and feed the world. Thank you very much and have a great day.
You too. Thank you for having been part of this.
Thank you so much.
Indeed, in equal measure to the three of you. What an inspiring session. How wonderful to see three such senior leaders in the food environment, in the policy environment globally, speak together and really inspire and tie together this pre-final session. Very pleased that the notions of science, the role of universities, and the very close interlinkage between the CG system and the Food Systems Summit has been expounded upon. So colleagues, please accept our most sincere thanks for this excellent session. And we do hope that you can find the time to stay a few minutes longer as we go into the final session of today. For our other colleagues that also has been part of today, you will have two sessions in the session stream on food systems transformation to address the SDGs in Africa. The first two of this afternoon looked at conceptualizing the African food system and the critical aspect of gender roles and the unequal status of women in the African food system. Later this afternoon, we looked at specific components of climate smart agriculture and food systems, and how this strategically tied together in this massive policy-orientated and action-orientated process in preparing for the 2021 United Nations Food Systems Summit. For each of these panels, we had a strategic writer or a summarizer. It started with Dr. Stefano Meras, Dr. Farai Kapfutsarua, and Dr. Seppo Ajigonta in this pre-final session. I'm very pleased to introduce, and Melody, I think I'm going to call it an envious task, Dr. Melody Mengskutsia from the University of Pretoria, senior researcher in the newly established Food Systems Research Network in Africa program at the university in collaboration with many others, predominantly University of Leeds. She has the task to have tied all of this together at a higher level and provide us with insights and the main themes that emanated from all of the discussions. So Melody, if I may ask you to continue.
Many thanks, Aldu. You called it an enviable task. I wonder if it's an inenviable task. But really, just thank you for the opportunity to do this summary today. And also thank you to everybody who has joined all of our sessions to talk about African food systems transformation with the aim to address the Sustainable Development Goals. It's been a rich and interesting discussion. And in my summary today, I hope to highlight some of the key points which were raised in the discussion, highlight some of the action steps that our speakers have recommended, and then, as Aldo mentioned, to try to pull together some of the main themes that have come up throughout the day. I really hope that I will do justice to the richness of the contributions of all our participants. So I'd like to begin by returning to the first overview slide that Professor Swanepoel shared at the start of our session today. Really to point out one of the key issues that's come out in many discussions, that food systems and agriculture are directly and indirectly linked to all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Food system transformation is therefore a fundamental opportunity for us to contribute to social, economic, and environmental development and sustainability. Conversely, failure to transform food systems can fundamentally undermine the achievement of the goals. We've noted 4 key outcomes that would come from a transformed food system. And the linkages between these outcomes and the various SDGs have been highlighted by Professor Swanepoel this morning, but also through all of the conversations that our speakers and panelists have been making. So really, to summarize, it's about access to adequate amounts of safe, nutritious food. It's about economic efficiency, reduced poverty and inequality, and there included also broader issues of inclusivity around gender and youth and other marginalized populations. It would be environmentally sustainable, not undermining biodiversity and ecosystems, and then characterized by sustainable consumption and production. So what would it take to achieve this? That was one of the critical questions that we've been trying to address today. And 2 main points were raised early on in the discussion. The first is that we really need to deepen our understanding of African food systems. And second is we need evidence-based interventions that can help to bring about transformation. These 2 topics have really been the foundation of all the contributions that our speakers made. Some were speaking to the notion of how we should and can conceptualize African food systems. Others presented evidence from their research and their own context to show what works in contributing to transformation. And I think together, through all the conversations today, we really have a lot of rich insights and a lot of rich wisdom that we can draw in answering both of those 2 questions. In his keynote address, Dr. Iyu spoke directly to the question of what would it take to transform the system, noting that we're currently off track to achieve a food system that delivers a healthy economy, healthy people, and a healthy planet. We need to act with urgency. And on the slide, I just highlight some of the key points that he brought up, areas where we really need to act urgently. We need to make sure we have a plan for transformation, that it's well-defined and focused. We need to make sure that there's adequate capacity in the system to deliver on the plan. And this notion of multidimensional capacities was one of the main themes that's come out from many speakers in our sessions today. We need to make sure that we have upgraded and appropriate infrastructures to be able to achieve a transformed system. We need incentives that promote the adoption of sustainable approaches, and we need to invest in innovations and technologies that can help bring about transformation. So I think without having known what many of the speakers would bring up, our keynote this morning touched on several of the main themes that would come out during the day. And critical to that was also this notion of partnerships. Partnerships across regions, partnerships across sectors, being critical to being able to design and being able to deliver better solutions together. So I move now to a few of the key points that came from our first panel today, which was really focused on the idea of how do we conceptualize the African food system. So while we may be able to articulate these outcomes that we're striving to achieve, achieving them is no small feat. And this was clearly highlighted by Professor Julian May in his lead paper, where he spoke to the complexity of food systems and the notion of the food system as a complex ecosystem, where all levels and factors are influencing each other. And for me, importantly, he placed individuals and humans at the center of that ecosystem. These systems are in constant flux and are heavily influenced by several megatrends, such as the changing demographic patterns that we've spoken about, rapid urbanization, the growing middle class in Africa, and then importantly, the topic for one of our panels today, climate change. Professor May highlighted COVID-19 as a risk in the food system and a shock in the global food system, really laying the platform for issues that several speakers brought up around how COVID-19 has impacted on food systems, whether that be in terms of access to food, in terms of different impacts of COVID on women. There's this multidimensionality around COVID-19 as a shock. And it has highlighted again the importance of the notion of food systems resilience. A key point that Professor May also linked to was that we need to build capacities for working in complex systems. If we want to identify effective solutions, we're not able to use simple solutions to address these challenges. So Professor Claire Quinn spoke about the work that the Food Systems Research Network for Africa, FSNet Africa, is doing around thinking about how we conceptualize the African food system. So a lot has been written about global food systems, but to date, not enough attention has been paid to the unique aspects of African food systems and the implications of the peculiarities and the uniqueness of the African food systems to the solutions and that we bring to addressing our challenges. So by improving our understanding of the food system, we can begin to identify pressing research gaps and potential leverage points for transformative change. And Professor Jane Mbuko's presentation really presented an excellent example of how if we identify those crucial points, and in her case, she highlighted the food loss and waste leverage points, that we can design solutions that enable high impact interventions. Strategies such as those presented by Professor Mbuko show us that there is great potential for scaling up. And that has been, for me, another big theme that's come out of our conversation, to say, yes, if we can identify something that works, how can we use this in a different context, in a way that is relevant to that context, and can still bring about the desired impact. Professor Hetty Skonfeld really challenged us to think about the entire food system and how the food system should be leveraged to address the growing problem of unhealthy diets, and to conceptualize the food system with nutrition and health in mind as well. And she made some recommendations around specific policy actions that could be taken in this regard. So I think together the contributors from that session have given us rich food for thought in terms of conceptualizing a unique African food system. Our second panel today addressed the issue of gender roles and the unequal status of women in African food systems. Despite the contributions of women within African food systems through production, food processing, and food preparation, they face significant, persistent, and multi-dimensional inequalities. Each of these inequalities has negative impacts in the system, which of course limits the contributions women can make to sustainable development. But importantly, these also limit the ways in which women can benefit from food systems activities and exert agency over their own lives. In her lead paper, Dr. Kamau Rittenberg has highlighted the need for us, and when I say us, the research communities in particular, to think about internal gender responsiveness as well as external gender responsiveness, arguing strongly that all scientists should have the skills to engage with the gendered implications of their research. Gender is no longer a side issue or something that we talk about after we've spoken about the key issues. Dr. Kamau Rittenberg has argued that it really needs to be mainstreamed and centralized into our research agendas. COVID-19, as I mentioned, has really brought to the fore some of the realities that women face in the research environment, and some of the strategies that we can take to help promote the participation of women in science, but also cautioning that we need to make sure that shocks such as COVID-19 don't further disadvantage women in the system. Professor Justin Peters' presentation was a really good example of ways in which we can be and need to be proactive and preemptive in protecting women and protecting aspects of the food system where women are vulnerable to risk. Their research around diseases in cassava has highlighted how a holistic approach in engaging women as critical actors can help to bring positive outcomes and is really necessary. A key theme from this panel was the fact that although women are critical players in value chains, they remain at the margins of power and decision making, where priorities are set, resources are allocated, and policy decisions are made. And Professor Mangeni really delved into the challenges around gender representation in agricultural research leadership and what we can do about this. She highlighted several factors that try to explain why, despite our investments in trying to deal with gender, we still face many barriers. And she brought to the fore the need for us to obtain and to clearly communicate credible evidence that shows what the cost of gender blindness is to the food system. Dr. Elizabeth Mankandarire proposed a conceptual framework for gender and the African food system, linking this to international and continental agreements. And importantly, she raised the point that governance and social systems that are not necessarily a part of the food system have a significant bearing on women's experiences within the food system. And really, when we're seeking solutions, that we need to look beyond just the food systems aspect to think about these broader systems of governance and social life and how these impact on women. The session on climate smart agriculture and food system really gave us many rich examples of promising climate smart agricultural practices and highlighted why research in this area really should receive priority. Professor Dekora highlighted many of the challenges, including soil fertility, climate change, insect pests, and then, of course, the complexity that COVID-19 has brought to dealing with all of these challenges. Professor Dougal's presentation, providing excellent examples of research solutions, did raise important challenges and important questions around why we sometimes don't see science-led solutions being taken up as widespread as we would like them to be. And he provided us some guidance and things to think about in terms of how to overcome these challenges. I mentioned only a few on the slide there in summary, but really highlighting, as we've spoken about quite a bit, the notion of multi-stakeholder partnerships and the role that they can play, the importance of improving how we communicate our research, and in what ways we tailor our communication to different stakeholders. And again, this notion of capacity building across role players, but including for farmers and extension workers. We spoke about, and Professor Mbo highlighted, the opportunities that African crops offer to identify uniquely African solutions to achieve food and nutrition security. South Africa is rich in diversity in terms of plants that are a healthy source of food and can make significant contributions to nutrition deficits. And not capitalizing on this is really an opportunity lost to the system. He highlighted key actions that need to be taken to make sure that we really elevate the ways in which Africa's neglected plants can contribute to dietary diversification and adaptation to climate change. And Professor Lisa Korsten has really highlighted some excellent examples around how we can use novel technologies in addressing climate smart agriculture, and really how technologies can create opportunities for stakeholders within the value chain to engage with each other. And a critical question raised from this session is how we think around this issue of upscaling what works and finding context-relevant solutions. Our final session for today was focused on preparing for the 2021 UN Food Summit. And it was a facilitated conversation by Professor Lindiwe Sibanda with Professors Fresco and Karan, who are members of the scientific group for the 2021 summit, which is coming up. So key points which came from this conversation is the importance of the summit being conceptualized as focusing on food systems and not just on the notion of food. And I think the reasons why that's important have really been demonstrated in our conversations today. The scientific committee is going to be very active in the months leading up to the summit, getting inputs from the broader scientific communities across countries, and they're going to be using several mechanisms for this engagement so that they can then provide evidence-based options to the summit to help inform decision-making processes. So as I lead up to my conclusion, I wanted to highlight some really interesting points that came from the conversation between Professors Fresco, Caron, and Sibanda. And that's really the ways in which science and the research community can contribute to food systems transformation. And the capacity building role has been clearly highlighted, but key for me is the partnerships for capacity building. And those are partnerships between universities across geographic boundaries, but it's also partnerships between universities and other research organizations. Food systems is an interesting framework for us to use in teaching and learning. And then of course, research partnerships, as we have seen, provide a platform for developing innovations and technologies that can help accelerate transformation. And one of the key phrases from the day is this notion of partnerships being key to enabling development through research. In conclusion, I really want to thank the two conveners, Professor Frans Swanepoel and Dr. Aldous Strubel, for their leadership and guidance in putting this session together today, and also for your really skillful facilitation of our conversations. Thank you to speakers and panelists for your inputs, and really a special mention to the session summarizers for helping my enviable task be a much easier one. And back over to you, Aldo.
Dr. It's good to see you very much. There are very few people that has the skill to summarize so succinctly such a diverse round of inputs. Melody, a very, very special thank you to you, and of course the summarizers that you have acknowledged. Colleagues, this brings us to the end of a very, very fruitful day. We want to thank you indeed for your participation. As Melody has rightly said, the speakers, the keynote addressers, the panelists, and a very great acknowledgement to the participants of the final session, Professor Sibanda, Caron, and Fresco. I think it's also quite fair for Frans and I, who I was delighted to work with in convening this session, to acknowledge the extraordinary leadership of the conference. I want to highlight the really outstanding role of Professor Max Bergman. We've been very fortunate to work with him and an extremely accomplished team over many years in presenting and participating in the World Sustainability Fora, and especially Charlotte and Zanette in our environment. We spoke about transformations, about impact, about the role of science, the global context, quality of life of people. And at the end, the base question is, what will it take? So I think we are quite well aware, colleagues, and know what it will take. And that should and must be the focus for us to go forward. On behalf of the co-conveners, thank you very much for your fantastic participation and the extremely valuable input. I'm sure you will join us in our own virtual gala dinners tonight and celebrate this excellent day and second day of World Sustainability Forum. And we wish you well. We'll be signing off now, and thank you for an excellent day.
Dear colleagues, friends, brothers and sisters, also thank you so much from the many places where we're organizing this event. Aldo, Franz, you know you are stars. You and your colleagues and your networks have, as always, upgraded our event. Thank you so very much. Anyone who has not had enough about food security and agriculture, we have a second day tomorrow. But in the meantime, thank you very, very much, everybody. So goodbye until very, very soon.